The storm has finally hit Westminster, and this time no one is walking away clean. In a scene that has stunned the nation, Parliament has exploded into chaos as Prime Minister Keir Starmer's once iron grip on power begins to crumble before the eyes of a furious Britain. Ministers shouting, aides scrambling, and the Speaker struggling to restore order. Yet the truth echoes louder than any gavel. The country has seen through the illusion. The man of justice has fallen from grace, and Britain is demanding answers. No one thought it would come to this. Not so soon, not so brutally. But as the clock struck noon, the corridors of Westminster trembled with a fury unlike anything in recent memory. What began as a routine session turned into a battlefield of accusations and betrayal. Members of Parliament stood on their feet, red-faced and roaring, their voices clashing like thunder as one explosive revelation after another rocked the chamber. Reports had leaked, documents, confidential emails and witness statements, all pointing towards Starmer's deep entanglement in what is now being called the scandal of the century. The Prime Minister, who once promised transparency, has found himself drowning in the very darkness he vowed to fight. And yet the irony couldn't be more striking. Keir Starmer, the man who built his image as a crusader for truth, a prosecutor for justice, now stands accused of betraying both. Every corner of the House buzzed with whispers, offshore dealings, hidden donations, backroom deals with lobbyists. How long had this been going on? Who else was involved? No one dared to say it out loud, but the question hung heavy in the air. Has the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom been living a double life? As the Speaker called for order, chaos only deepened. Opposition leaders seized the moment like vultures circling over wounded prey. Rishi Sunak, his tone sharp and cold, called it the greatest disgrace to ever taint number 10. Nigel Farage's smirk said it all. He didn't even need words to tell the nation, "I told you so." The Labour benches sat frozen, faces pale, eyes darting nervously toward their leader, who sat motionless, lips tight, avoiding every gaze. Cameras captured it all. The silence of a man who once commanded the room but now seemed powerless, cornered and exposed. Outside Parliament, the streets pulsed with outrage. Protesters waved banners demanding resignation, shouting that the people had been lied to for too long. The air was thick with disbelief and fury. Social media caught fire. Hashtags like Starmer resign, Justice for Britain and collapse of Labour climbed to the top of global trends within minutes. From London to Liverpool, the message was unified. Britain wants justice and it wants it now. The irony, this was the man who once stood before the nation promising accountability, preaching integrity, and now he's the one running from it. Inside number 10, sources whispered of panic, advisors pacing hallways, phones buzzing non-stop, and every attempt at damage control falling apart before it began. Some aides reportedly begged him to make a statement, to face the cameras, to show leadership, but there was only silence. What could he possibly say? That the rumours were false, that the evidence was misunderstood, or worse, that he had no idea how deep this web of deceit had grown. Each hour without a word was another nail in his political coffin. Even loyal party members were beginning to fracture. "We can't defend this," one senior MP allegedly muttered under their breath. The fear was contagious. If Starmer fell, how many others would go down with him? The once solid Labour fortress now looked like a crumbling castle of cards, shaking under the weight of its own hypocrisy. And the people, the very ones who put their faith in him, were watching every moment, their patience wearing thinner with every second of silence from their so-called leader. Meanwhile, whispers spread that the palace had been briefed. Yes, even King Charles, normally shielded from the storm of politics, had reportedly been informed of the brewing constitutional crisis. And if that's true, then Britain isn't just facing a scandal, it's facing a reckoning. Like, for a nation that prides itself on democracy and honour, what happens when its leader becomes the symbol of everything it's supposed to stand against? The storm outside Parliament shows no signs of calming. The chants grow louder, the anger sharper, and inside the House, one thing has become painfully clear. Keir Starmer's reign is no longer a question of leadership, but it's a countdown to collapse. But the biggest shock of all, that countdown might already be over. Is this the beginning of Starmer's downfall? Or has the final blow already been struck behind closed doors? The morning after Parliament's eruption felt like the calm before a second, deadlier storm. London woke to headlines screaming betrayal, collapse and disgrace. Every newspaper splashed Starmer's face across its front page. The once confident Prime Minister now reduced to a symbol of political decay. The people betrayed. Justice turns on its own. End of the Starmer era. The air in Westminster was thick with tension, not just from the scandal itself, but from the uncertainty of what was about to come next. Ministers avoided eye contact in the corridors. Their whispered conversations, quick and sharp, like conspirators plotting in the shadows. The question was no longer if Starmer would fall. It was when, and who would deliver the blow. Behind the heavy doors of number 10, panic had turned into paralysis. Sources described a government frozen in disbelief, trapped in a nightmare of its own making. Senior aides reportedly clashed behind closed doors, arguing whether the Prime Minister should step down immediately or attempt one last desperate act of defiance. Every passing hour without a response made things worse. The silence was no longer strategy. It was surrender, and the public could smell weakness. Across social media, fury turned into ridicule. Memes mocking the invisible Prime Minister flooded timelines, while protesters outside Downing Street shouted louder than ever, "Where is Starmer?" Inside the Labour Party, the cracks became canyons. Senior figures who once defended their leader were now quietly drafting resignation letters. The shadow cabinet, usually the picture of loyalty, had splintered into factions, some calling for calm, others demanding a clean break before the entire party imploded. Leaked messages from internal group chats told the story better than any press conference ever could. "We can't save him anymore," one message read. "If he won't go, the party will burn with him." The betrayal was spreading faster than the scandal itself. The Labour brand, once rebuilt on promises of integrity and reform, was now drowning in the same swamp of deceit it claimed to clean up. The opposition, sensing blood in the water, struck without mercy. Rishi Sunak delivered speech after speech, painting Labour as the architects of their own destruction. Nigel Farage took to the airwaves, calling for a general election to restore dignity to Britain. Even the usually reserved Liberal Democrats joined the chorus, demanding Starmer's resignation in the name of national honour. Parliament, once a place of debate, had turned into a political feeding frenzy. The Prime Minister's defenders were outnumbered, outmanoeuvred and out of arguments. Each day he stayed in office became a national spectacle, a slow-motion collapse playing out under the world's gaze. And beyond Westminster, the chaos was spreading. Businesses began voicing concerns about instability. Investors grew nervous, the pound wavered, and international news outlets began asking the unthinkable. Could Britain be facing a full-blown leadership crisis? Foreign allies watching from afar issued carefully worded statements of concern while quietly distancing themselves from Starmer's government. The illusion of control was gone, replaced by the uncomfortable truth that the United Kingdom, a country that once prided itself on political steadiness, had been thrown into a spiral of confusion and rage. Meanwhile, in homes across Britain, ordinary people debated the scandal over breakfast tables in pubs, on buses. Some called it justice served. Others saw it as proof that the entire system was rotten beyond repair. But all agreed on one thing: this was no ordinary political scandal. This was a reckoning. And the one man who could speak to the nation to explain, to take responsibility, remained silent. Reporters stationed outside number 10 described the eerie stillness behind the black door. Curtains drawn, no movement, no statements. Was Starmer still inside? Was he preparing a resignation, or had he already lost control to forces within his own party? The vacuum of power was growing larger by the hour. Rumours began swirling that Labour's inner circle had already chosen a successor, someone ready to step in the moment that Starmer stepped down. All was pushed out. Names circulated in hushed tones. Trusted allies, ambitious rivals, even those who once swore absolute loyalty, now quietly measuring their distance. Politics, after all, has no friends, only survivors. And as the cameras waited outside Westminster, one truth became clear: the storm wasn't over. It was gathering force, and the eye of that storm was moving closer to number 10. Will Starmer break his silence and fight for survival? Or will his own party strike first, ending his rule before the nation even hears his defence? By the next morning, Westminster no longer looked like the seat of government. It looked like the aftermath of a political war. Every corridor echoed with whispers, every office buzzed with uncertainty, and every loyalist who once defended Starmer was now either hiding, resigning, or scheming. The power vacuum had grown wider, swallowing allies and rivals alike. Reporters lined the streets outside Parliament, their voices trembling with excitement as they announced one resignation after another. Senior ministers, party whips, and long-standing advisors, all gone within hours. The message was unmistakable. The ship was sinking and no one wanted to go down with the captain. Inside number 10, the atmosphere was described as suffocating. Starmer's inner circle had dwindled to a handful of desperate aides trying to manage the unmanageable. Some begged him to face the nation, to speak before it was too late. Others urged him to resign with dignity before Parliament voted him out in disgrace. But Starmer remained behind closed doors, pacing like a man trapped inside his own downfall. The silence that once seemed strategic had now turned into a symbol of guilt. Each passing minute without a statement deepened the sense of inevitability. The fall was no longer coming. It was already underway. The media, sensing the endgame, went into overdrive. Every channel ran breaking news banners. Every headline screamed collapse. The BBC called it the fastest political unravelling in modern history. Sky News described it as a government on its knees. Even outlets that once protected him had turned. The Guardian, long a Labour-friendly paper, published an editorial titled "Integrity Lost, Why Starmer Must Go." Tabloids splashed photographs of his grim face with captions like "Leader in Hiding" and "The Silent Prime Minister." There was no sympathy left, only the smell of blood in the political waters. And outside, the storm was reaching its peak. Tens of thousands gathered across the nation. London, Manchester, Glasgow, Birmingham, holding banners that read "Justice for Britain, resign now and no more lies." Chants filled the streets like a battle cry. Protesters lit candles outside Downing Street, symbolising the death of trust between the people and their government. Police struggled to contain the swelling crowds as emotions ran high. For many, this was more than politics. It was personal. Years of disappointment, broken promises, and deception had finally erupted. The people weren't just calling for a resignation, they were calling for a redemption. In Parliament, the opposition pressed harder. Rishi Sunak stood once again, voice sharp as steel, declaring that every moment Starmer clings to power is a moment of national humiliation. Nigel Farage thundered that the people had been deceived long enough. Even members of Starmer's own party began to stand, some trembling, some defiant, calling for him to do the right thing. The chamber shook with jeers, applause and raw fury. The speaker struggled to maintain order as chaos spilled into every corner. Cameras captured the tension, the shouting, the glares, the slow crumbling of a government that once prided itself on discipline and control. Yet amid the uproar, one question haunted everyone. Where was Starmer? Not a single public appearance, not one address to the people, not even a written statement. Rumours circulated that he had fled London, that he was meeting legal advisors, or that he had suffered a breakdown under the immense pressure. None of it confirmed, all of it believable. Because by now, the myth of control had shattered. Starmer was no longer the figure of authority. He had become a ghost haunting his own government. Meanwhile, the markets trembled. The pound slipped further. Investors began withdrawing. And the business community warned of a confidence crisis. Britain's international allies from Washington to Brussels expressed deep concern about the country's stability. It wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a national emergency. A prime minister cornered, a party in ruins, and a nation on the verge of political paralysis. The irony was impossible to ignore. The man who once spoke about restoring trust in leadership had now become the reason the public no longer believed in it. By evening, Westminster was alive with speculation that Labour MPs were drafting a formal letter of no confidence, the final nail in the coffin. Whispers spread like wildfire. The motion could be introduced within hours, and still no word from Starmer, no apology, no defence, no fight, just silence, the kind of silence that ends careers, collapses governments and changes nations. Will Keir Starmer finally face the nation and attempt to reclaim control? Or will history remember him as the Prime Minister who vanished when Britain needed him most?